Hi everyone, and welcome to our very first podcast called Embracing Authenticity. I'm reading the theme. So, this was brought to you by Prosperity, and Prosperity was developed in light of the tragic police killing of George Floyd by our CEO, Doug Winters. He decided to create an advisory panel as a call to action. This panel consisted of Karima, Edie, Jen, Jessica, Doug, Lindy, Jermaine, Marissa, Nathan, and myself, as well as our marketing director, Ed. We met for the first time in June to develop a name and discuss our purpose. Out of that, we came up with Rosa Parks' famous quote: I would like to be known as a person who is concerned about freedom and equality and justice and prosperity for all people. Thus, Prosperity, a coalition for change, was born. Out of our meetings, we developed several goals that we hope to accomplish to create an authentic culture within Prospero. We developed a diversity statement to show our commitment to embracing authenticity. That diversity statement reads: Prosper- Prospero is transforming the status quo of approaching end of life care. We want our patients to live their best lives now, and we advocate for our team members to do the same. We provide equitable opportunities to all employees and applicants, regardless of race, religion, gender, sex, age, physical ability, neurodiversity, and experiences. And we encourage all team members to come to work as their authentic self. Supported and informed by Prospero's interdisciplinary team committed to inclusion and diversity, Prosperity, a coalition for change, Prospero, continues to grow by offering programs designed specifically by minority groups to guarantee equity within our organization. Our goal is to discuss on creating an inclusive environment at Prospero. This podcast is to offer a platform for an open dialogue and an opportunity to educate and understand others' perspectives. So, with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jermaine.
Great job, Janelle. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone. Let everyone tell everyone who you are and what you do here. First, I'll start with myself. I'm Jermaine Reed. I'm a care support supervisor, and we're kind of on the front line, and we assist our nurses with various things. Our care support specialists do. We assist them with various things, and we just want to provide great customer service to all of our patients and everything. The next person, I'm going to let Marissa introduce herself.
I'm Marissa Williams. I'm a project manager here at Prospero. I'm just going to go a little bit personal so you guys can know me a little bit more. I'm 24 years old. I just turned 24 back in August. I was born and raised in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is actually the same place where Jacob Blake was shot 7 times by police back in August. But I'm going to discuss my feelings on that a little bit later in a different episode. Yeah, I was born in Kenosha, but I live here in Memphis with my boyfriend Max and our 2 dogs, Colby and Bree. And yes, that's the cheese theme for Wisconsin. Um, I went to undergrad at Winona State University in Minnesota, where I got a marketing degree. And immediately after that, I went to grad school at the University of Memphis and got my degree in healthcare administration. And I just stuck around afterwards. Um, I was originally drawn to healthcare because in January of 2017, right before I graduated from undergrad, my dad unexpectedly passed away. That led me to see quite a few flaws, even at my young age of 20, in the healthcare system, which really drove me to want to make some sort of difference in a system that I saw was broken. Um, I I joined the Prosperity Coalition because many of my family members work in law enforcement, and when I saw the video of George Floyd being murdered in Minneapolis, I finally saw after 24 long years that not all police are good. I want to continue to discuss racial inequalities because being biracial myself, it leads me to a lot of internal struggles as well as disagreements with both sides of my family. In reality, I truly believe that 99% of police officers are good because I've met the good ones and I know that they're good. But walking in a predominantly white neighborhood or reaching for your wallet or even breaking the law does not mean that a police officer, someone who works for the public, gets to be judge, jury, and executioner. So I want to continue to have those conversations, and I look forward to having open and honest conversations with my coworkers so we can continue to cultivate a culture of inclusivity here at Prospero.
Great introduction. Great introduction. All right, next up, I'm going to go with Janelle.
Right. So I'm Janelle Ellis. I'm on the Learning and Development team. I have a bachelor's in psychology. I went to Mississippi College in Clinton, and my master's is in education. I went to Walden University. I'm originally from St. Louis, so show me state girl all the way. I moved to Memphis about a year ago, and when I saw the job announcement for Prospero, it was like the sky opened up and the heavens sang. This was the job for me, and I had to be here. But then when I heard about the Prosperity Coalition, it touched me in a lot of different ways, mainly because every week in training, if you've ever sat in training with me, you've heard the why. You've heard me say that, my grandparents meant a lot to me. They were civil rights activists. I remember watching the Eyes on the Prize PBS documentary series when I was in kindergarten and seeing Emmett Till getting murdered on August 28th, of which I shared that birthday. And just remember seeing his face at 14 years old because he whistled at a white woman and to find out all these decades later that the incident never even occurred. So to learn our history and to see that our present and our future is still kind of going along those lines, it just meant a lot to me that here at this company that I work for, the CEO took it upon himself to say, you know what, we're not going to be silent. We're going to do something about it. And I had to jump at the opportunity to be on this coalition. So prosperity means a lot to me. You'll learn more about my background as we go throughout, but I've had, the police killed a family member of mine. I've been harassed just for walking into a store and not looking like a minority. I've had people question my own race because I can float between different ethnicities just looking by the way that I look. I've had coworkers say things about my hair. So I've just experienced a lot of things, and I think that prosperity for me means a lot, and at all that we even have this opportunity.
Great, great. Before I go into our guests today, I want to go ahead and give Nathan a chance to introduce himself. He's our producer.
Yeah, so I'll cut my camera on for just a second and make this super brief because I want to leave this up to the stars of the show. But yeah, my name is Nathan Scarborough. I am the employment branding intern here at the company. I've been the intern for about a year, but our human capital team has been gracious enough to allow me to stay on as I build a personal company. But I was very excited to hear about this project and was totally on board with being or producing it and hopefully distributing it in I mean a clear and concise way. I'm excited to be a part of it, but I'll pass it back to y'all.
Thank you, Nathan.
We're
All
really
right, and
excited to have you, Nathan.
yes, we are. Thank you so
We
much.
really could not do it without him.
Thank you, Nathan.
All right, all right. So
I
now,
say that a lot.
right, hey, Nathan does a lot for us, and he's very appreciated. So we're going to go into our guest today, which is Jen Crenshaw. Let her introduce herself.
So it's fun to be the guest. So I am Jen Crenshaw, and I am Prospero's Chief People Officer and a proud member of Prosperity, our coalition for change. I, you know, it, I told the Prosperity group pretty early on, maybe even in our first meeting, that prior to coming to Prospero and joining the company as our chief people officer, when I was trying to decide what I wanted my next gig to be, I really thought that maybe I wanted to be a chief diversity officer somewhere, because this is certainly diversity is lifelong work for me. Both personal experiences. I was I like to say half of my family is African American. I was married to an African American man for 12 years, and helped him raise one of his daughters, and so a young biracial girl. And I love people on who can see different sides of this argument. And I'm very, very open to the fact that, there are a variety of sides. I would say that I also hold some pretty firm opinions that there's just some truth. And some truth doesn't have sides. It just is truth. And so, that will, probably come up in future conversations, not necessarily what I wanted to talk to the group about today specifically, but Jermaine, Marissa, and Janelle were kind enough to ask me to be the guest today, because what we wanted to do very specifically in this first episode is something that Jermaine is going to talk about. And I realized that I just started into the next bullet point on the agenda that very clearly says Jermaine.
That is perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. It's a
You
great
go
topic,
for
and I
it, Jen.
understand why you got carried away with it. But it's listening to be heard, and what it's going to cover is conversations about debated topics, without being disagreeable or disrespectful. Topics to make sure that everybody has, everybody gets their point across. Everybody's heard, but we want to do it in a respectful way, and we got to understand that everybody's gonna learn. Everybody's going to disagree, but we got to disagree respectfully on how, and make sure that everyone gets a chance to get their point across. Everybody gets a chance to be heard, but not looked at differently because of what they feel or, their approach on things. So, Jen, I'll let you go back with it and
Sure.
let you give a little background on it and, why you wanted to discuss this topic.
Absolutely. And because I am known to be able to go on for quite some time, I'm wondering if the producer might be able to speak up and tell me just how much time he wants me to spend before I hand it back to one of the capable members of the team.
Well, Jen, I think you have a lot of good stuff to say. So if I notice you start to ramble, I'll cut you off. But
All right. I like that.
I think you've got a good thing going.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. So when we first started talking about doing this podcast series, one of the things that came out just in our group discussions was, how do we do this in a way that does in fact allow everyone to be heard and respected? It's something that's really important to all of us. And it goes back to our diversity statement that we wrote about feeling like everyone should feel as though they can come to work at Prospero as their authentic self. And in order for everyone to feel safe as their authentic self, it does mean that we have to be willing to have differing points of view. And it has to be safe to speak up and say, I either, don't agree with that for some reason, though I would say, hopefully you're willing to state your reason. Because if you're going to speak up to say, I don't agree, then, probably good that you can follow it up with some reasons why you don't agree. Otherwise, I think if you're just wanting to put disagreement into the room, maybe not, right? Maybe hold on to just saying I don't agree with that unless you have a point of view that you'd like to share, which we all want to be open to that, because it's not enough to say that those who are currently experiencing discrimination, who have had to deal with discrimination for, different in different situations in their life. It's not enough to say that we want those folks to feel comfortable, though we in fact do, right? But it's everyone, right? So that means it should also feel comfortable for me as a white person to say, can I ask a question about that, right? And so,
Agreed.
for instance, right, one of these series that, I know one of the shows that the team has planned, right, is to be able to talk about microaggressions, right? I will guarantee you that not everybody in this organization knows what we mean when we say, a microaggression. And it needs to be okay to say, what is a microaggression? Right? Without somebody being like, see, you don't get us, you don't understand, you don't even speak our language. That's probably possible, right? We may
That's
not
true.
know what a microaggression is. That's not the same thing as saying that we don't care about how people are made to feel
Hmm.
with microaggressions, right? We just didn't have a word for it potentially, right? Like
Right.
once we're educated, it might be like, yeah, it makes me feel uncomfortable when I hear other people talk like that, right?
Right.
And so then it has to be okay to speak up. And so in talking about this, one of the things that I, brought up with the team is one of my absolute all-time favorite quotes. Maya Angelou is a favorite of mine, but a quote of Maya Angelou's that I actually apply in my practice of human capital throughout my entire career is probably one of her most famous, which is, I've learned that people forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And the reason that I say that I incorporate that into even how I practice human capital is because, I can get into discussions that are like, well, we don't want a process to overtake being able to treat people like they are important to us. I don't want people to become their Zenefits number, right? I want people to be people, right? And so that's true. I don't want people to become their Zenefits number. I want every single person to feel as though they are, individually an important part of this team. And that's certainly how I see it. However, I don't necessarily think that having, manager self-service or people or employee self-service in a system like Zenefits automatically makes people feel like a number. If you ask people, they say there are some things I just want to be able to do myself because then I can just get it done. Right. And so it's even in HR, I even say, let's step back and say, how would this make someone feel? Right. If we put this system in place, are they going to feel empowered to do their own thing? Or are they going to feel like, oh, no one cares about us, we're just a number? Right. So we have to ask ourselves those kind of questions. And so that's the kind of thing that I would want people to think about when they think about our diversity statement. And we say that we want everyone to be able to show up as their authentic self, is that really stopping and thinking about how do we make each other feel, right? And it matters, right? I can't tell you, when I first started in HR back in the the Stone Ages, people would say you got to be able to leave your work stuff. Like literally, somebody said to me once, you got to lock your home problems in the car before you come into the building.
I've heard that.
I have heard that, and it's
Yeah.
impossible.
It just quite frankly is impossible, right? Now, at the same time, I do expect all of us to be able to behave professionally. You do have to be, you can't bring your argument with your loved one from home into the office, right? And you can't, it's like, in the same way that, I don't want people coming home from work and kicking the dog, right? And so it does go both ways with that, right? Like, but it is literally impossible to lock parts of yourself away before you walk into the building. So if you are heartbroken about something, if you are scared for something that's happening with a loved one in your family, if you are stressed because, your loved one has been, their job has been affected by all this craziness that's going on in the economy right now. You're not going to be able to leave that behind, right? In the same way that, none of us can leave our ethnicity behind. None of us can leave, so the thoughts and processes on, can't we just be colorblind at Prospero? No one actually said that to me out loud. Let me just be clear.
Okay,
No
good. I was
one.
like,
No
Like,
one.
what?
No one. No one asked me if we could be colorblind at Prospero. I promise, no one did. But
Okay.
but that it is something that people will say, right? Like people will say, I'm not racist. I'm colorblind. Well, we're not, right? I mean, some people are truly, genuinely colorblind, and that's their thing completely, right? That's not about this topic, right? And so we're not asking anybody at Prospero to be colorblind. We're not asking anybody to lock their parts of themselves in their car before they come into the building. We want you to bring your whole self because we genuinely believe that your whole self is what makes us special. And so in coming up with this topic of wanting to listen to be heard, what I would say is you listen to the podcast series that this team is going to be bringing forward. And as we hope, this podcast series will encourage conversations throughout the organization, that the conversations wouldn't only happen here in a recorded session, but that they would also happen just when you're having lunch with somebody, when you're having, when I'm so excited that we're starting to go back into the office, when you're sharing a cup of coffee, socially distanced, of course. Couple of things that I would ask you to ask yourself as you embark on these conversations, either while you're listening to this podcast series or while you're engaging in discussions yourself, right? What do you want to learn? So when you decide to tune in to any of our future podcasts, right? I brought up the topic on microaggressions. When you decide that you're going to listen to that podcast on microaggressions, what do you want to learn? Right? When you decide to continue that conversation later with somebody who may or may not have listened to it, right? You want to bring it up and say, "Hey, I just listened to one of the podcasts that, that Prosperity did. It was the one on microaggressions. Here's what I've been thinking," right? When you bring up that conversation, right? Don't just be thinking about what you want to say. Think about what you want to learn. So when you bring up the topic of, and I'm picking on microaggressions just because I think it's an easy one, right? But when you want to bring up the topic of microaggressions with somebody, right? It's fine if you're bringing it up because you also want to offer some education. That's a good reason to have a discussion. Education is a good reason, but also be open to learning. Be open to listening to understand, not just listening to respond. And I would say also, it's here at Prospero, maybe differently than other places, maybe not. I think it is I want everyone to know that it is okay to bring up topics in an effort to take a stand about something that's important to you, right? I would ask that everyone also understand that just because something is particularly important to you doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to agree with you with the level of importance about that topic, right? But you should feel comfortable being heard. You should feel comfortable to say, this is really important to me. It's something that I want to talk about, right? And always being comfortable to bring topics to Prosperity, to bring topics to me, to Herquacia and Human Capital, whoever you're comfortable with, to say, this is a dialogue that I think that we should be having at Prospero. This is something that's important to me, and I think we should be talking about it as a team. Maybe it's going to become something that Prosperity or the leadership at Prospero is committed to, taking some action on or making change on, or maybe not yet. Maybe it's early. Maybe, I'm just seeding these ideas, right? But be open and willing also to seeding ideas, right? Sometimes you do have to plant the seed. Unfortunately, we're not always the ones sometimes when we plant the seed to get to see the harvest of that seed, right? But if we never plant it, there'll never be a harvest.
That is true. That is
So
so true.
sometimes you might not be the one that gets to necessarily plant the seed and then see it all the way through to harvest, right? And sometimes harvest is long in coming. But if you don't plant the seed, right? If you take the approach of, I'm not going to bring this up because I don't think, I don't believe that there'll be a harvest. Well, the only thing I can guarantee is that if you don't plant the seed, there will not be a harvest.
Right. If you don't plant it, it won't grow. You're definitely
You'll
right.
never know.
Right?
Yep.
So, I would just definitely encourage, right? Like, ask yourself, what do you wish to learn? Ask yourself if you wish to educate others, and are you standing up for yourself or for others? And again, being willing maybe to do that when you aren't going to see immediate gratification, right? But just that you really feel like you had to at least have the conversation, plant the seed, and let it see where it goes.
So, Jen, I had a couple questions.
Yeah,
And
please.
I'm a note taker, so I've been taking notes while you've been
Okay.
talking. So you mentioned even if you're having a rough day at home or going through something personal, we still want you to show up at Prospero as your whole self. And I agree with that, and be authentic and say I'm going through something, but is it expected that your whole self also means your whole amount of energy? Because I know when you're going through something personal, I might only be able to give 40%, but I'm here and I showed up. So, how do you recommend people having that conversation with their supervisor?
Yeah. Look, I mean, so I'll have to say, like, in that specific example where, if you genuinely feel like you're only given 40%, you might need to consider taking a PTO day.
Oh, I was just about to say that. I
Yeah.
was just about to say that. Like, as far as being a manager or, being a supervisor in management, I really stress that if you don't feel that you can give 100%, and I understand that you really want to be at work and you really want to do your job, but if you're not here at 100%, then you may possibly make a mistake that could cause, a lot of issues.
Yeah.
So I would rather
Maybe
for you to go ahead.
40% was dramatic. I saw
Yeah.
Jermaine and Jen's eyes pop up. For those of you that are listening and not watching the video, they were like, 40%?
Yeah, so yeah,
That
40%.
seems a
Like
little bit low.
40%.
What about
We
like,
gotta look at
like
your
I can
PTO
only
bank.
come and give 90% of
Yeah.
what I have? You're
Yeah.
still in that
Necessary.
A range,
Yeah,
but
you're still in the A range. I would just still want you, because you never know how fast your 90% can literally drop to 50%, depending on whatever the situation is that you're dealing with. You don't want to put yourself, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation for that percentage to drop, because you never know. Something you may see, something you may hear, may set you off and make you regress and make you go back to thinking about what you were thinking about before you came to work, or whatever the issue is. I mean, I would just rather for you, if you can take that time off, go gather yourself. We could try again tomorrow.
Yeah. What's
yeah,
that saying around, life is, is it 20% what happens to you and 80% how you handle it?
Hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Here's what I 100% agree with, not to start using percentages again, but I agree with what Jermaine just said. And I'll say a little bit more about it, right? In that, energy management is a choice, right? Some days you don't feel it. but you got to bring it anyways, right? Now, I don't think that that's being inauthentic. I think that's being a grown up, right? I think that's, like, and I'm not a parent, so I'm going to speak out of line here for a second. I don't know how many parents we have on the phone, but my guess is, there's a whole lot of days that you don't necessarily feel like adulting and parenting, but you don't get to say to your kid, can you just give me a day to not
5 minutes tops.
right? I mean, it's just so we have to, energy management is a choice, right? You don't get up every day and feel like adulting. But sometimes you gotta choose to adult. Again, I don't think that having to take a deep breath, pull yourself together, and give your all to your job is being inauthentic. Though, if you're feeling that bad that it literally is, right? I mean, when you like, it is a situation where you got nothing to give, and there just is no pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and making it happen. Then that's what PTO days are for, right? That's what flex days are for. That's what, even to the extent that that's what our employee assistance program is for, right? If you find yourself having, more days than you used to, where it's, hard to, look, we could be headed down a whole other path, right? We could be talking about real depression. We could be talking about real health issues, right? I don't want to tell anybody who's dealing with true depression that you can just, put a smile on your face and push through it, right? That's not true, right? You need someone to talk to. You need, potentially to talk to a professional. And so I certainly don't want to make it sound like, no matter how you're feeling, you can always choose to feel differently. I don't believe that. I think there are times when you can't just choose to feel differently. I would say, so did we harp on your 40% enough there?
Yeah, you did.
Awesome.
And then my other thing I wanted to hit on, you mentioned approaching a conversation with the intent to educate or to learn. And I've heard from a lot of people, mostly Black people, saying it's not my job to educate everybody on what the Black community is dealing with. And I agree with that to an extent, but also if someone's coming to me saying, like, I want to learn, I'm going to say, like, yeah, of course, like, let's have that conversation. But I also think it's important that people come to a conversation prepared with knowledge. So while I do appreciate people wanting to learn and I'm open to educating, also spend 10 minutes on Google and do a little bit of research just so you know kind of what you want to talk about and a little bit of background about it, because I don't know everything about what the Black community is going through or what women are going through, so it's hard for me to say. But I think if somebody approaches a conversation saying, like, I don't really know anything about microaggressions, I did a little bit of research and then I think I understand what it means, but, like, how is this affecting people on a day-to-day basis? Then I can say, absolutely, like, let's have that conversation. I'll let you know how that's faced me. But I also think it's important that people do a little bit of self-education before approaching somebody that may not be prepared with all of the knowledge in the world to share.
Yeah.
Which
No,
I
I
was
think that's
thinking
great.
too. I was thinking too that maybe even perspective because they see us as the subject matter expert for the Black community. So if I Google something, alternative facts, but and I do think you should do your research. But I could also see where it's just easier. Hey, let me ask Marissa and Jermaine their opinion on this because they're subject matter experts in the topic that I want to discuss. But I do think from the teacher brain in me, you should probably do a little bit of homework before you bring it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Um,
just
oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
No, please, Marissa, go.
I was just gonna say, I think we should talk about, like, I know Jen at the top when you started talking, like, I think we should talk about facts. Like, what constitutes a true fact, and then what veers off that fact into an opinion.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think, I definitely agree with that. And I would say, no one, I shouldn't say no one. I certainly don't expect the diverse employees of Prospero, whether it be, diverse from not a part of the majority ethnicity, whether it be diverse as it relates to your religion, diverse as it relates to gender. Doesn't matter, right? If you're not a part of, what we consider to be a majority group, I certainly don't want, members of the Prospero community feeling like we're basically saying, that it is your job to educate us about your differences or how we should be behaving toward those differences. I guess I would just say, in the same way that we should be thinking about maybe how we approach certain things if we are a part of the majority group, and being careful about what we say or how we say it. And when I say be careful, I'm certainly not talking about like watch your words when certain people are in the room. If you're going to say something racist, just make sure it's only white people. That is not what I mean. Because saying something racist is not okay at Prospero. I don't care if it's only white people in the room. So that's certainly not what I meant by, when you're watching what you say. I mean it more from the perspective of choose your words so that if anyone heard you, you would not, you wouldn't feel like you had to apologize to them for something that you said. But, I want us to all be open to learning new things. And I definitely feel strongly about like educating yourself on the facts. So Google may or may not be a good place to get facts. Individuals' opinions or individuals' experiences are just that, individual experiences, right? And so I think you have to kind of pull, what can you get from research? What can you get from having discussions with real people? Leads me to really, one of the last things that I wanted to talk about. And, I am actually going to show something on the screen here because for those who are watching, I think having this visual will be helpful. And for those who are not watching, I'm sorry, but let me show you. So I am not the author of this. I am using this from a consulting group called Sendelaney. And Sendelaney's consulting group, who came up with many decades ago, I learned this a very long time ago, the results cone. Right. And so when you're having these conversations, when you're listening to this podcast series, what I would encourage you guys to be thinking about is what are the insights that you can provide? What are the insights that you can take away? Because what I love about the results cone is that it basically shows us that, if you want to affect the results you get. So here at Prospero, we want to have the kind of organization where the result is that we show mutual respect for one another and everyone feels that they are safe showing up as their authentic self. If that's the result I'm looking for, then what's going to create that result is the behavior of all of the individuals at Prospero. Doug cannot make this so. Jen cannot make this so. A podcast series cannot make it so that each person feels safe bringing their authentic self to work. The behavior of everyone in the organization is what makes it so. And so, what causes people's behavior? Behavior is caused by thinking and beliefs. So, if I believe that every person deserves to be respected, that is how I will behave. If I believe that it's okay to show up 10 minutes late and apologize, it's okay to be late and apologize. It's literally that simple, right? Behaviors are driven by our thinking and our beliefs. So if we want different results, we have to change behaviors. If we want different behaviors, we have to help people see things differently, think differently, potentially believe differently. And how is thinking built? How are beliefs built? Through insights. And so I'm really excited about this podcast series, and am going to basically wrap up my comments other than any questions that you guys have and anything specific you want to talk about. But I'm basically going to wrap this up to say this podcast series is designed specifically to provide insights so that everyone at Prospero has the opportunity to learn from others, so that maybe your thinking will be changed, maybe your beliefs will be changed, which then ultimately affect behavior, which then ultimately get us to the result we're looking for, which is that everyone feels safe to show up as their authentic self. And so that's what this podcast is all about, for the series is all about for us. And I am excited about this series and hope that everyone will tune in. I think we have awesome topics planned, and I am speaking very little, if ever, again. Ha ha.
Well, we do
If
really
you say
appreciate you
so,
speaking, though.
Jen.
Yeah, well, yeah, we really do appreciate you speaking, though. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
No, the likelihood that I could attend and not have something to say will be slim to none, because I get really excited about this stuff. I really was thinking about being a chief diversity officer, so it's really exciting that I get to do that here.
Dreams come
Absolutely.
true.
Dreams come
Right.
true. So happy to take any questions or for you guys to point out it, because I know, in our pre-show, if you will, right, last week when we met, there might have been other points that we talked about that you wanted to make sure got brought out on today's discussion that maybe I didn't get to hit, that I'm happy to have you guys bring up anything that we may have forgotten.
Jermaine, Janelle, was there anything that you guys wanted to hit on? I know that I asked my questions kind of along the way, but anything from either of you?
No, not at this point on the topic we discussed. I kind of, I'm in agreement with Jen on the majority of everything that she said, actually. I do agree that the people here should be the individual that they are.
Mhm.
I implore my team to do that. I want to be around the people who they are. I mean, of course, I want the professional you, but I still want you to be you.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. Janelle, you've seen me, on countless calls as far as how my energy is. And, just like Jen said, you don't want to do it some days, but you got to do it. And at the management level, of course, your team feeds off of you.
Right.
So if you don't bring the energy, you can't expect the energy. So
I agree. I mean, even from a training perspective, in the middle of training the system, and it looks completely the way it did yesterday when I was practicing, and you're frustrated, and you're like, "Oh, great, they're doing updates." And so it's not that I'm being disingenuous. It's just you have to keep your professionalism because
Yes.
we've heard from participants like training is like Disney and it's awesome. It's like Chick-fil-A and it's great. And in the background, we're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I have no energy. It's been, all these things going on, policies, procedures, all of that. But you still have to do your thing, be professional. And I appreciate this podcast and just prosperity in general for even creating a safe space to share, to say, you know what, we are human. Yes, we are program managers and supervisors and chief people officers and trainers, but we are still human at the end of the day. And we don't have to lock our emotions in the car or at this point in time, leave it in the dining room or
The pantry. I put my attitude in the pantry with the canned goods.
it's up high on the top shelf so the kid can't get to it.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing this podcast grow and have more conversations with our other coworkers, some that we may not know personally. So I guess that leads into our next episode, which will be Silent but Harmful: How Microaggressions and Bias Shape Corporate Culture. I know Nathan is going to be putting up a form on Flow for people to fill out if they would like to be a part of an episode in the future or if they would like to suggest an episode topic. We're definitely open to things that aren't listed in the drop down, so please share things that you'd like to hear discussed or that you'd like to be part of the discussion on. With that, Jen, thank you so much for hopping on. We really appreciated you being on the call, and I'm sure that we'll hear from you in the future.
You're welcome. I appreciated being here, and it's the topic of effective communication is one that I'm pretty passionate about, and so excited that this was my topic in particular, and super excited about this podcast, and can't wait to hear more episodes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.